Always My Soulmates by Watermelon's Melon Felon. Chapter 19, Lapse. Yuri. Ichi. Katsuki Yuri was staring at the back of the man he'd looked up to the most in the past 11 years. Beside him was the little punk and his coach, though Yuri didn't care very much about them. When Victor turned around suddenly and gave one of the most fake smiles Yuri had ever seen, Yuri knew something bad was about to happen. Commemorative photo? No. Yuri had enough photos of Victor Nikiforov as it was, and he didn't need another. With a frown, Yuri turned and walked away, if only to mask his sadness. Something had to be done. That night, bundled in a cramped seat on a plane ride home to Japan, Katsuki Yuri dreamed of finding his love for skating once again. Ni. When Yuri awoke, it was a morning full of stress and absolute panic. His final performance at the Grand Prix final was today. His free skate had been terrible, and no matter how much he tried, he just couldn't get the damn thing right. Hours passed as Yuri whiled away his time worrying about his upcoming performance, though to be honest, he wasn't as worried as he thought he should be, not with that nauseating feeling like usual. He also felt an awkward sense of déjà vu, which he attributed to the fact that he got like this before every competition. He didn't understand what was going on, but it couldn't be important, right? He'd failed so terribly. And what was even worse than failing was feeling like he'd already failed the exact same way before. Somehow, someway, it was like the day had already happened in a sense. Yuri sighed and rested his head against the wall. He considered going to the washroom to deal with his pent-up emotions, but wasn't so sure he'd have the free time. He just saw someone go in, and he didn't fancy crying in a stall while other people were in the room. Yuri waited until he returned to his hotel room before he broke down and called his mother. The night was filled with terrors and loneliness. San. That afternoon was like one big movie for Yuri. He felt like he'd been through the exact same thing already and wasn't all too shocked when he heard the official scores. He was incredibly sad about them, but he just didn't know why he wasn't sad enough. He'd fallen so many times on the ice that it was a miracle he'd even gotten up and finished his routine. And Celestino said nothing about it, but Yuri could feel the disappointment in the air and he hated it. Yuri wanted to get better, but his damn nerves controlled him so much that he honestly could not get past them. Maybe he needed to meditate or something. Yuri sighed and leaned against the wall, waiting for his coach to finish up whatever he needed to do. Off to the side was none other than Victor Nikiforov, who had won the Grand Prix final as expected. The man was standing beside his coach, who seemed to be ranting about something, though Victor didn't seem in the least bit interested in listening to the man's words. A moment of silent watching must have caught the other man's attention because he looked around suddenly, a frown on his face. Nikiforov whirled around and his eyes lightened when they landed on Yuri. "Would you like a commemorative photo?" Frowning, Yuri did the first thing that came to mind. "No." He stood and walked away, if only because he was frustrated with the day's events, and then to have his idol just assume that someone wanted a photo with him simply because they were staring for far longer than necessary. No, indeed. Yon. Yuri sighed and pulled himself out of bed. So, he'd finally managed to put it together. He'd just double-checked the date, to be sure. But he was certain that he had just somehow lived out the same day at least 3 times in a row. A lapse was supposed to happen when you were destined to meet your soulmates. If you didn't meet them the right way, then you would end up lapsing through the day again and again until you finally did things right. Yuri didn't know exactly what he was supposed to do, but he was beginning to get annoyed with repeating everything, especially if he was going to fail every time. Unless he could work on not failing? He failed, and if there was no tomorrow, then he'd just do better next time. It could be like having practice back to back to back. And Yuri was good at practice. Q. Yuri managed to not fall once, though his landings were shaking. Honestly, he didn't know what had happened, but it was like he'd just gotten too used to all the falling and worrying and failing the days before that he honestly could not feel any worry when going into the rink that day. Without the crushing pressure weighing him down, Yuri had managed to score 3rd from the bottom, which was a lot better than last. He didn't know how many times he'd have to go through this, but at least he could get the practice in. That had to count for something at least. Ju-san. Vic-chan's passing no longer affected him too much. He was aware of his faults as a pet owner, and he resolved that should he ever take up such a responsibility again, he would be better. Better than before. And like Victor Nikiforov, he would remember his pets. "You're doing really well today," Celestino commented as Yuri took a long drink from his bottle of water. Yuri withheld a scoff. After 13 tries in a row, one had to get better in some way. "Have you found your pace?" "Probably." The performance this time was the first time Yuri had changed the choreography mid-program, and he was so glad it paid off. His quad double combo became a quad triple, and he added a triple loop at the end, just because. The landings weren't perfect, but his score had certainly risen enough. Jushiji. Yuri spent the evening after his loss in a local rink. It was smaller, and he decided that if he was going to possibly wake up and have to relive the day again, he might as well do more than the same thing. So Yuri decided to teach himself the salchow. After watching enough people do it and several videos, Yuri was confident that he could learn it. He seemed to have all the time in the world to himself during this damn lapse. He might as well use it to better himself somehow. It took over 30 tries before he finally managed to land without having to catch himself. He'd say that the pain tip was worth it. And the fact that it was awesome made him elated! Nijushi. On this time around, Yuri had added a quad salchow to his routine and changed his triple axel to a quad toe, triple toe combination. He also switched out his triple double combo for a triple axel, basically reworking the frame of his jumps and switching the order. To see Celestino's gaping face when he stepped off the ice with a new jump and no falls or stumbles was the highlight of this time's attempt. He had just finished in 4th, just a few points below the 3rd place finalist. And that was probably the most fun he'd had while skating in a long time. Nijushiji. "You did really well today." Victor Nikiforov had spoken to him and actually said something other than offering a photo or a hug. Thanks. Yuri was too shell-shocked to actually say anything with meaning. "You've improved a lot." Victor continued, a smile on his face. Yuri's only response was a nod. Victor's eyes glinted just a bit, and he leaned into Yuri's space to whisper, "Next time around, I expect you to be standing to my right." The man sauntered away then, leaving Yuri to clutch his bronze medal between shaking fingers. Did that mean what he thought it meant? Nijuhachi. Taking a literal leap of faith on this day, Yuri changed his triple toe loop to a quad, which although it had a shaky landing, he still got points. His triple lutz became a quad, and his triple axel became a triple axel triple toe loop combo. He also added a triple flip for fun. If he was literally going to try for the silver, then he had to take a step out of his comfort zone. Sometimes it was best to just give it your all. Also, he might be waking up and repeating the day for the 29th time. So what did it hurt to take chances? And the chances had been taken with almost perfect finesse. Only Victor Nikiforov beat him. And literally only Victor beat him, because on this day in history, Katsuki Yuri came in 2nd place and found himself fingering the silver medal between his gold fingertips. And when he returned to the hotel that evening, he did so with Victor Nikiforov's number in his pocket. The next morning, Yuri gaped at the open screen of his mobile that told him that the date had changed. He'd done it. He had fulfilled whatever it was that needed to be done in order to get out of the lapse. Finish 2nd place and get Victor Nikiforov's number. Because apparently Victor was his soulmate. The lapse was done. It only took 28 days in a row, but finally it was over. The ringing of his mobile drew his attention. He answered, "Hello, Yuri. I see you've realized that time has continued on again." It was Victor. "I'd like to take you out today so we can get to know each other better. What do you say?" Fidgeting a bit and feeling nervous, Yuri murmured, "I'd like that." He really would. Though first he needed to go scream into a pillow because Victor gave her up